Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Itty Bitty Living Space event, in which the Al-Mundhir is added to the game. So this week brings the first ever rollover of the new PvP season. Of course, we just had Season 1 of PvP, and now we are in Season 2. This doesn't really change too much, other than there being a new immortal as far as we can get as the primary immortal, as well as, of course, all of the leaderboards being reset. So now you can actually go and regain all of your rewards. For example, if we go over to PvP now, the main things that this does is every single one of your goals you can now reach again. As far as like the free side of the pass or the paid side of the pass, you have, of course, now another 77 days, as it lasts for 11 weeks, to be able to go get all the rewards that you want to go get. There is no unique rewards for it, and it costs $15 currently, or regional equivalent, so not really too worth it. I did go for it the first time around, and it does bring your immortal up to about level 25. So if there's ever a immortal you really want to get upgraded, buying out the pass does seem to get them roughly to 25, give or take a level, depending on how many of the objectives you do and everything else. But it's approximately level 25 out of the 30 levels that they can be upgraded to. So if there's ever a immortal around in a new season that you really want, then maybe go for it. Otherwise, I'd probably skip on it personally, as it's pretty much just extra loot. There's no unique rewards you end up getting, so it's only particularly worth it if the immortal is particularly good. So far, neither of which have been really over the top. This one is pretty average compared to the other immortals. Like an immortal you'd want to do it for, which won't have an event, but you know, like the next immortal Ossifer is one you'd probably want to do it for, possibly, because it'd be so ridiculously strong. But average ones like this probably aren't as worth it. As far as what she does, she deals 3/4 of her damage as true damage, splash damage, to 3 random enemies. So she'll hit for 75% of her damage or magic value to 3 random enemies, and hit each one of those for 50% to the 2 adjacents, hitting for essentially another extra 100%. And it's boosted by Hourglass Gems at a very small boost ratio. That doesn't really make that big of a difference. And if it's used in Mirage Expanse, of course, like every other immortal, it will gain double the amount of damage. It is also always allowed to be used in the Mirage Expanse regardless of what the restriction is. Like every other immortal, it does have Invulnerable, giving it immune to pretty much everything. And its final trait is a 50% chance to convert a yellow gem to an Hourglass Gem when its turn begins. Overall, it doesn't really seem worth it compared to Daughter of Time, which already has a pretty similar overall mechanic, while just be able to create way more Hourglass Gems than this thing, which basically only does it off of its trait. While it does have Invulnerable to go with it, it's just not good enough to really bother with. And even if you were to end up getting this maxed, I don't think it'll be good enough value to really bother with. So overall, it's a pretty average immortal, pretty much in line where most of the other immortals are. So you can get it pretty easily just by participating in the PvP related stuff. That's pretty easy to get. Of course, all the goals have also been reset, so you can get a ton more burning marks, open those, and go from there. But yeah, basically a time to go get a bunch more of these, go and get the new immortal. And of course, there's also a new absurdly overpriced troop. Currently, it's not working. This will probably be fixed later today, if I'm not mistaken. If I go to unowned, it doesn't even show. But whatever this troop is, do not get it. It is way too expensive. Even at 500 golden marks, it is still better to dump all of your gold marks into deed books rather than buying whatever the exceedingly overpriced mythic is. Like the mythic that rolled over from the previous PvP season, even if you didn't end up getting it, which I assume is most everyone, you will be able to in the future. He'll be in Soulforge on the next rotation. You'll be able to get him in event keys, in, as well as normal drop table in like several months from now. By next year, pretty much guaranteed he'll be in drop table by then. So yeah, you can just get him in the future. So whatever one is here, just ignore it for now. It is way too overpriced. Even if they've reduced it some, it is still way too overpriced probably. I think we can kind of see it here, though I believe it's currently broken. They'll probably have this fixed later today. But we can kind of see what it does. It drains all mana from an enemy and deals some damage to all enemies. So it's basically inverse Famine, boosted by mana drained. Famine drains all enemies and then does a lot of damage to one enemy, whereas this drains one enemy but deals damage to all enemies. The problem with this is Famine is way better. It is way better to 4 times drain and basically kill a unit than it is to just poke some units lightly and drain only one of them. It's pretty bad overall. It has a 35% chance to convert a purple gem into a purple mana potion, which is a cool effect, but way too low of a chance to really be viable, and it has some spell reduction. But if you just compare it to something like Famine, there isn't really much of a need to ever use it. Famine, for what was that, the exact same mana cost, ends up draining all mana from every single enemy, and then does enough damage to sometimes one-shot the enemy. as it does 2 times per all the mana drain. So if you drain something like, let's say, 60 total mana from the opposing team, that'll be 120 additional damage on top of what he's already doing. So depending on your mode, you'll one-shot, regardless, or double shot, regardless, it's 4 times mana drain, which is way better than draining only 1. Its traits are a little bit worse, but doesn't really make that big of a difference when his ability is just so much better. So overall, it's pretty bad. Just get Famine instead. And even Famine you don't need because it's from Apocalypse, so just ignore both of them and you'll be good to go. Anyways, that's everything with the new PvP season. One other thing to keep in mind is the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest is still for the new Mythic. Of course, we covered a video on that last Friday if you haven't already checked it, doing a key opening, going over all the teams, but this is the exclusive Mythic until this Friday reset time. So if you want to still get them, you have 4 days to do so, all the way until the end of Thursday. Otherwise, if you want the wide range of all the Mythics within the drop table, wait until at least Friday after reset time in order to have the normal drop table back again. But for now, he's still the only thing in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest until that rolls over. Aside from that, let's go into the new troop. So this thing's not awful. A great time to stock up on yellow purple arcanes, as they're only 200 glory each if you end up needing them to upgrade stuff. As far as the troop itself, it creates 8 to 11 yellow gems, which is slightly too little. That's not bad, but for this to be particularly consistent, it would need to be a little higher than that. Something like a 9 to 12 range or something similar. But it's, for an ultra rare, it's still, or sorry, an epic, it's a range that can still be usable. And then it jumbles the entire enemy team, which, a very situational use case. Essentially what Jumble does is it makes every single unit on the opposing team go to a different location. I believe they can still roll the same location where they already are, but it does try to re-roll them all to a different location. So their first slot could become 4th, their second goes 3rd, 3rd goes 1st, you know, just all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it can be helpful if the enemy team is in a very specific order where it needs to be in that ordered function. These days, that's not really much of a mechanic. Since scroll spam teams aren't really as big of a thing these days in the current state of the game, more so just cast spam, being able to reorganize a team like that generally doesn't make as big of an impact. It has a lot stronger impact whenever skull meta is a thing, when, you know, you need a really specific skull spam troop in first slot and like a mana accumulator in a certain spot and your like skull crater in a certain spot, but particularly that thing that does extra skull damage in your first slot. But it doesn't really affect casting teams as much. Casting teams can generally be ran in almost any order, and while there is generally an efficient order as far as how you want to mana accumulate, like on most wand teams you generally want to put your wand in first slot or your Stellarx in first slot if you don't mind risking him. But you know, if those get swapped around, it's not that big a deal. Like, you're still going to get through the battle just fine compared to a skull spam team where it could be quite detrimental to your team if it does get reordered. So in the current state of the game, this mechanic isn't that useful, but you know, in the future or in specific battles, this could end up coming into play occasionally. And he does have an okay chance of extra turning if you have a yellow storm on the board, as well as some amount of yellows already there. He can kind of loop a little bit. Biggest issue, I guess, with this, aside from his slightly low gem spawn, is a 14 mana cost. If this was just ever so slightly lower, he'd be a bit more consistent. It kind of reminds me a lot of like the Journey troop nerf in that regard, except he doesn't need a whole team built around him in order to function. So in some sense, even better than that, but it's still kind of like that nerfed amount of gem spawn where it's enough to extra turn, but it's not as consistent as other options in the game. So unless you absolutely had to use it like for Underspire this week or something similar, you're very rarely going to put it onto your team, but it can still find its place, especially in early game. Has spell reduction, has yellow link, which obviously synergizes really well with the fact he creates a bunch of yellow. But yeah, he's okay. There's better options out there, but if you lack options, this could potentially be a good yellow mana accumulator for you. He also has a lot of synergy with Ihi Cattle if you're allowed to use absolutely anything in a battle. That has Empower into convert into Yellow Storm, which those two together can actually be somewhat decent, as they both kind of cycle together while both assisting each other really well. So that is a kind of low rarity, mid rarity kind of thing that you can end up doing with them. As far as the event key drop table is concerned, we have Drifting Sands. For the most part, I would say this is an exceedingly skippable week as far as event keys are concerned, but I'll still go bring everything up real quick. So, as far as Drifting Sands are concerned, everything that is not in the drop table include all 5 of the faction troops from wherever the faction is, the Deep Hive. Those are not in drop table, most notably Beatrix. If you want to get your Beatrix, you have to throw Chaos Shards at the Deep Hive. Do not try to event key for it, as it is not in the event key drop table. You have to get it specifically from the faction itself. Other things that are not in the drop table include the Tarot card, which is from the Vault key drop table, which of course we just had a Vault weekend, so open some of your Vault keys, you might get it. The Sentinel from Underspire, which you need to pray to the RNG gods to even have a % chance of getting that thing, as those things are still so annoying. Please drop them already. But actually, I won't go all the way there. It will break the other thing, but you know how rare they are. We're still missing 2 of them, and honestly, probably for another year or 2, we will be missing some amount of them. They are way too rare. Anyways, obviously the Gem Dragon, which is from the Gem Drop table, or from Soulforge, if it's in rotation. Actually, I didn't check Soulforge, I just now realized. Well, we'll check it when we get there. And I believe that's everything. Everything else that you see here is in drop table. For the most part, yeah, very skippable. There's nothing really here that you need. The only thing that's even remotely usable is something you get from the faction anyways. You don't even need to open a single event key to get it. So unless you're just trying to get a certain amount of kingdom stars, I would completely ignore event keys this week. Really good week to 100% skip. Unless you're just trying to upgrade the kingdom to any specific star level. It is 30 starable, so if you want to get it to 5, 10, 20, 30, whatever you're aiming for, it is doable. However, yeah, unless you're doing it for that purpose, there is no reason to be opening event keys this week. Oh, do I need this pet? Why do I feel like I need this one? Oh, no, that was the ancient horror one. Yeah, I knew it was recent because I didn't remember its art. Anyways, so other things. So events we have going on this week. This Tuesday, we have ourselves the faction event for the Deep Hive. Of course, you can get the faction troops from that at any point, but of course, definitely make sure to get yourself a Beatrix. Not only is it really good for the faction, but it's just really good across the entire game. One of the best cleansers in the game, one of the best true damagers in the game, one of the better loopers in the game. Not a perfect loop, but for how much damage it does, it's really good. This Wednesday, we're getting that great mole-looking thing, which is for Drifting Sands bonus. Thursday, we have the class event for Dervish hero class. It is a very, very, very exceedingly useless hero class. If I'm not mistaken, even as a stun mechanic, that is very laughable when you look at what this thing does compared to Elementalists. It is so horrifically bad. You will never use this thing ever. It's basically just get some XP for it if you want, and then just ignore it forever. The only reason you ever need to even level this thing is to get stars on your faction, on your kingdom. And as you can see here, this Friday we get Bounty Hunter, and oddly enough, a really good bounty hunter troop, which is very rare these days. This is actually a bounty hunter troop that in the future, if you want to utilize it, can be used on your primary bounty hunter team. So as far as what it does, it is a 12 mana cost blue-purple, and it destroys gems in an X shape. X shape is pretty interesting. There's a lot of mana accumulation things you can do with it. It's really hard to use, but once you kind of get used to it, there's a lot of value you can get from an X shape. The main reason you tend to not use X shaped troops in the current state of the game is two reasons. One is a lot of X shaped troops are mostly early game stuff. Like none of them are really scaled to end game right now. Like there's not a mythic that does an X shape destroy, so we don't really have that kind of scaling or anything to really be able to utilize it later in the game. But the other reason you tend to not use it is the amount of time it takes. While you can just, click anywhere on the board to use it very effectively, you could spend as much as like 30 seconds trying to figure out where you want to cast it if you want to go figure out like the absolute most optimal location, and just takes a little longer compared to like just click mass explode on a troop or something similar, or mass mana accumulation. It just requires a bit more thinking, but it's a lot of fun to use if you haven't messed with the mechanic before. And on top of all the mana that you get from the X shape and all the cascades you get from the X shape and all the extra turn potential and everything that you get from the X shape, you also get 2 free enchants, which can also apply to itself. It does 2 random allies, which can also include itself, and it should be 2 different allies. It shouldn't double tap onto the same one, so this could be pretty good for any bounty hunter team going forward. If you're running 4 times, you can start incorporating this if you don't want extra damage. If you're doing a 3 team with 1 damage source, you could do this as your second mana accumulator for your big thing, like if you're doing Stellarex or Tesla or something similar. But overall, yeah, this is going to be really good in bounty hunter going forward. I still feel like I'll be sticking with the Ogress as my primary mana accumulator, but if I ever feel like putting a second mana accumulator going forward, I think I might actually put this onto my team. I'll probably just spam click it though, rather than thinking of where to use it. But of course, if you want better value on a given instance, you can end up applying it into a proper location. Try cascading 3s, try cascading for extra turns, stuff like that. But overall, yeah, a lot of potential, really good for bounty hunter. I don't think you'll use it much outside of bounty hunter for the most part. But inside Bounty Hunter, I could definitely start to see it being incorporated into various teams, especially if you feel like you already have enough damage. If you don't, she'll definitely be like the first thing you drop, but if you do already have enough damage, she'll probably be the first thing you add to your team going forward. Of course, this Bounty Hunter week, you'll have to use her on your team in order to get maximum amount of points, but going forward, yeah, you can still end up incorporating her, so really interesting to see how that ends up ultimately panning out with the events and everything. Beyond that, there's nothing really to mention on the calendar here. We already had the Bounty Hunter, blah, blah, blah. Just double checking everything. Halloween stuff soon TM'd. Right around the corner. Also, we have a billion Vault events. We just had a Vault event, of course, last weekend. And then 2 weekends from now, Vault event again. And then after that, Vault event again. Like every 2 weeks for a while now. And then after that, it's the 10-year anniversary of the game. But anyways. So, Soulforge. I didn't actually peek at this earlier, as I mentioned. Let's go peek at it. So, anything good here? I'm seeing trash so far. I'm still seeing trash. When does it become not trash? I guess if you need Emerald. But this is a gem dragon, not a celestial dragon, so it's not as relevant. Where's all the good stuff? What do I forget when this came out? This isn't the first time using Soulforge, right? I don't think it is. Pretty sure it's not. But yeah, where's all the good options? Where did they go? Is this his first time? I don't feel like it is. He's such a bad troop, I don't even remember, to be honest. That might be his first time in Soulforge. And if it is, if you need it, I guess you can get it. But yeah, it is pretty bad this week, unfortunately. We got a Gem Dragon instead of Celestial Dragon. We got pretty bad overall Mythics here. Not ideal. As far as weapons are concerned, I don't believe we got either of the two useful ones. Let me just double check before I say that, though. Let's see. Drifting Sands. Are you Drifting Sands? Are you Drifting Sands? Are you Drifting Sands? Nope. On to the next one. Duskbringer. Are you a Drifting Sands? Are you a Drifting Sands? Are you a drift? Okay, there is one weapon. Good thing I checked. Scarab of Nefertani is the only thing you need to do in Soulforge this week. Aha! Be a Scarab of Nefertani. You'll want to grab this in order to eventually craft Duskbringer. Even if you don't want to craft Duskbringer yet, or even think you're ever going to do so, still get it now. It is basically free as far as how much it costs. Relative to, but at least Duskbringer anyways. But you always want to get the components for both Duskbringer and for the Ruby, even if you feel like you're never going to craft them, though the Ruby is absolutely insanely valuable, whereas Duskbringer is pretty situational. In a lot of situations, Black Manacle is actually better than it. I also show it with Black Manacle a lot of times just because it's a lot more accessible than this weapon. The biggest issue that this weapon has is, unlike Dawnbringer that has a 20 mana cost for a pretty similar amount of damage, it has a 25 mana cost due to applying Deathmark. This extra benefit of having Deathmark relative to a 5 higher mana cost is not worth it almost ever. If you had to use this, like for example, if it was a Kedar event week and you have like no damage source and you want to kind of cheese things with Deathmark, then yes, in that kind of situation it's okay. But generally speaking, if you're just looking at a pure damage output, completely ignoring the Deathmark effect, you're going to get better value from Black Manacle almost every single time compared to Duskbringer. So it's a very situational weapon, but you always want to make sure you craft towards the 3 components. So when it does roll around, or you know, when you do feel like crafting it for completion's sake or just to have it, or for the rare circumstance where you do run it on a Kedar event, then yeah. So make sure to get the component. It's pretty cheap, relatively speaking. So if you're going to go for anything in Soulforge this week, definitely make sure you get the Scarab of Nefertani for the future Duskbringer crafting. Anyways, let's go now into all of the teams. We'll start all the way from the top with the high... Oh yeah, I didn't even go to Doom, but yeah, we have Doom this week. I kind of skipped over that. But yeah, we do have Doom. Make sure to use the shield. It gives you 2x score. It does cost 500 gems to get it, so early on in the game you might not run with it. However, if you do have the gems for it, make sure to get it. Not only do you get a Doom weapon along the way, but you also get some of those yellow Forge Scrolls to go and upgrade various Doomed weapons. And you also get a lot of sigils in order to go and complete out the rewards. Of course, just report back to your guild what all the better rooms are, with Fireball, Heroism, Lucky, stuff like that being the higher priority. Actually, has my guild been reporting back yet? Probably not yet. Am I even in guild chat? No, we haven't been reporting back yet. But it's still too early. But make sure to report back all the better rooms, because the way that this works is it's the same in your entire guild. It's not the same across the entire game, but within your guild, all the rooms are the same. So you only want to be taking the better ones that your guild wants to prioritize. Like if you want power, you can go for the power ones in order to gain more stats, stuff like that. And just ignore all the ones that aren't as useful. With Fireball, Heroism, and Unlock always being worth it, regardless of what your guild wants to prioritize. So yeah, just report back the good ones. Don't report back the bad ones. Then everyone does the good ones, and you're good to go. That's pretty much how Tower of Doom works. And of course, you have to use a pure yellow team. With that being said, let's go to the teams now. So, Yellow Doom. Of course, we have to use a pure yellow team, and this does include weapon. Also, you probably want to be using Doomed Barrier anyways. But even if you weren't using Doomed Weapon, that does include your weapon. Actually, no, never mind. Actually, I think you are allowed to use any weapon in this game, now that I think about it. But always use Doomed Barrier, or always use the Doom Weapon, because it gives you double score whenever you kill a Doom. But anyways, so first team. Super high rarity one. Pretty standard. Stellarix and the Pharaoh Khafru. If you don't have Pharaoh Khafrus, use Takshaka. You're good to go. Alright, normal team. That doesn't use all high rarity stuff. We have Guard's Avatar but Quick Kill, which still high rarity, but it actually utilizes the shield aspect. So as far as what the shield does, we've been getting a lot of these. The next 4 Dooms are all going to be this kind of weapon. It just gives a bunch of armor to a ally, and then barriers all of that same color. So in this case, we're using a pure yellow team, and of course we're getting 4 times yellow, as it gives barrier to all yellows. It's a pretty bad weapon compared to other armor gaining weapons like Urskia Shield, like Golden Cog, and stuff like that. You're pretty much never going to be using the shield Doom weapons. However, you do have to for Tower of Doom, and if you're going to be, might as well get some value from it. So if you use this on Guard's Avatar, of course, he has a really good boost ratio based on armor. So that's pretty much the whole premise here. You have turn to empower off of Harpy Mage, because it's 75% mana start with enchant, and you just go and get your Mass Explode. This will give you your Guard's Avatar, and ideally also your shield. You cast your shield on Guard's Avatar, you cast Guard's Avatar, you win. Rinse or repeat. You have some extra mana accumulation off of Surquai and Hadley. You can also clean up anything that has like resummon, or is just really tanky in general. And you just kind of keep going back and forth and get your team going that way. As far as the low rarity team, we were just going all in finesse spam. So Finesse, really easy troop to end up obtaining. Just open some guild seals and you'll end up getting it very quickly if you don't already have 3 of them. Harder part will be fully trading it, but with orange orbs, it shouldn't be that bad to do even in early game. A basic premise of him is he deals damage to 2 random enemies, or deals damage to an enemy and a random enemy, I mean. And if they're yellow, it'll also deal double damage. But the main gimmick of why you run 3 of him and don't run any color other than yellow, you can, there just isn't any room. However, the main premise of this is this final set of what he does. If there's a storm, he will give 6 mana to all other allies. This is very good for 2 things. One is if you cast this twice, of course, he will start cycling into every single one of his other finesses. Because if this already has full mana and this has at least 5 mana, you'll cast this has full mana. You cast this now has full mana. You cast this now has full mana. And you just keep going over and over again unless the enemy has mana drain somehow. Otherwise, you can keep doing it forever. You do have to give up your turn every time, but you hit for a lot of damage. The other thing that makes this work is, of course, guess what's divisible by 6? The Doomed Barrier. So if you ever need extra protection, if your things are starting to die, just throw your shield onto your first slot and you're good to go. These things have really high tankability. They have 50% score reduction. So you'll be able to go do that, get them all barrier, get your first slot a bunch of extra armor so it doesn't die. And every 3 times you cast this, you're going to be able to cast this again. So you're pretty much never going to die. Even in early game, you'll have 4 times barrier. You'll have a first slot that's really tanky. You'll have all the damage you need. The only big issue is you do give up your turn every single time you cast, but just make sure there's no extra turns so the enemy team doesn't get it, and you should pretty much be good to go. Big downside of this team is it does only use 1 color, but there is the advantage of constantly having a yellow storm. You do have to use Stormcaller for this, ideally fully traded, though you do not need all of its perks. It is very important that's fully traded, though, as this team only works if it has its final trait for that yellow storm. Is the main thing that puts everything together, not just because you need a lot of yellow, but because this thing needs storm to function. And if you can get some extra turns, you gain a lot of extra value. Since your whole team is Strix and you have 3 of these things, you'll gain 12 to all stats per extra turn, which in an early game is insanely good. You'll basically be doubling your stats in just like a few extra turns, so really, really, really strong. And of course, even in later game, you can just stack this up, and even at the later fights, just keep taking extra turns, and you can scale this up to any fight. The only issue with that, of course, is you'll be trying to take extra turns on a board with no board control, but otherwise, just keep casting your finesses, and you should be good to go. Next, we have ourselves the faction event for the Deep Hive. Deep Hive is a brown-green restriction, though you're allowed to use any colored hero weapon. For this, we're using a pretty standard Skia Shield Rowain. Speaking of the shields being useless, you just use their Skia Shields, almost always better. Golden Cog or any of the other ones. The shields from the Doom weapons are just so bad compared to how the others scale. So pretty much a standard Romaine quick kill. Pretty comparable to the Shield Urskia Shield, or sorry, pretty similar to the Shield Guards Avatar team we were showing earlier, except this is with Urskia Shield into Rowain. But same premise as far as overall team. Next, for the higher level range, we have ourselves a pretty standard Hiking Iron Good Catharix quick kill using Wand and Leprechaun, though of course you could put any 2 damage sources you want here. Put 1 damage source here, 1 damage source here, you're good to go. And Wand can be replaced out for any resummon mana accumulation weapon. Next, we have ourselves the Pure Faction team. For this, we use 1 Scarab Knight into 3 Beatrix, so if you want to speed it along, you can try going down the 4 Beatrix route. The Scarab Knight is mostly because it has 50% score reduction. Also gains barrier on its cast if you do want to end up casting in a little bit of armor, but for the most part, you're just spamming Beatrix until you win. And it's just here to make sure your Beatrixes survive to skulls and for it to survive to the final fight, so you have the full team by the final fight. The slight problem with 4 times Beatrix is, of course, you might lose 1 of your Beatrix by the final fight, but you're generally not going to lose your Scarab Knight by the final fight. As far as the Dervish Clash, you have to use a 4 times monster team. And by 4 times monster team, I mean, it doesn't have to be 4 times monsters, just monsters from Drifting Sands is all you have to use for this. One guy that's pretty good for this, and pretty much one of his only few use cases, is this mode right here, the Sand Runner. He's one of the few troops that has a 75% mana start while having a really low mana cost. This makes it so you can get his ability up really quickly. And for a low damage range kind of game mode like this, you can end up getting quite a bit of value from him. You just cast 1 black mana goal, and then you go all into your speed runners or sand runners, and then basically just kill them all out that way. Ends up working out really, really well. And of course, you can just double cast black mana goal as well. Or if you want to, if they finally got the final part of Duskbringer, you can go use the Duskbringer build. If that final piece that's in Soulforge right now allows you to finally craft it. Anyways, next we have Underspire. Underspire is specifically a Drifting Sands restriction. You have to use both weapon from Drifting Sands as well as all your troops being from Drifting Sands. For the first team here, we're just doing a Doomed Axe into Queen Beatrix. Spoilers, for every team you're going to be running here, just Beatrix spam is really just how you want to structure around it. For this, I end up doing Cronus because the second you take even a single extra turn, you'll gain enchant onto all your allies, just helping you gain mana a little bit quicker. Has a convert as well with a bunch of Hourglass Gems that can help you get a bunch of extra turns. Those Hourglass Gems feed into this for a little bit extra damage, especially if you have alignment, and otherwise you're just spamming Beatrix until you win. And low rarity Freddy team, of course, you just spam Beatrix until you win. We're just using Dust and Stand here to utilize the Brown a little bit. Also creates Brown Storm, which increases the extra turn rate of Beatrix ever so slightly. Unfortunately, not a Green Storm, but kind of works with the whole like Brown synergy kind of thing to actually be able to use some of your Brown. You can also pull an enemy to first position to kind of reorganize them if you want, which could be pretty useful for trying to kill something out with Skulls. That might be a little bit more of a threat on the opposing team. Otherwise, just keep spamming Beatrix until you win, which is pretty much the entire Underspire strategy this week. Spam Beatrix button until the entire team is dead, as is pretty much every Beatrix team with how loopy is. You've probably seen her in PvP. It gets kind of insane sometimes for how easy it is to get. Also, for any of you that don't know, you can do this any week, not just this week. But of course, if you want to go get your Beatrix, which is right over here, Deep Hive, go to Portal, go open these things. Hope you get lucky. And boom, Beatrix, first try. Yeah, Beatrix first try. Its percent chance is, what is it? It is a 2.52% chance, which means you have to open about 25, give or take a few. So that's what, about 5,000 shards if I did math right. So it's about 5,000 shards if you don't already have a Beatrix on average. So definitely make sure to pick up your Beatrix. You can do that any week, not just right now, but of course she is very beneficial this week, even more so than she normally is. But anyways, guys, that's a full rundown on everything. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. Definitely feel free to leave a like on the video. Helps a lot and is greatly appreciated. Video should be on screen right now, too, if you want to go check out the Mythic video from last Friday if you didn't already catch it. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.